As I sit here at a local coffee shop in Denver and look over the images and videos of the Hondas to Honduras, it brings me back to the excitement and innocence that a multi-country adventure can really bring. We were so naive. A few years earlier, we'd completed really our first generation adventure philanthropic trip, riding motorcycles from Tucson to Cabo San Lucas with a stopover about 50 miles east of Ensenada in the middle of nowhere to spend a day with children at a remote orphanage. This was a culmination of an earlier dream of philanthropic travel. One of the founding concepts of our little group is giving back to the community. We originally formed a nonprofit called Our Father's Legacy based on the ideals and selflessness our fathers and family had distilled upon us. Both Dan and my father were U.S. military veterans and had seen some terrible things. They chose to take a different path and live a good life, giving back when they could and even when they couldn't. After this epic 3,000-mile motorcycle journey to the bottom of Baja, Mexico and back, I was approached by Dr. Paul Brinkman on an upcoming trip to Honduras for an ocular brigade. This was a medical mission that was 5 days of hard work, teamwork, camaraderie, and giving that was so incredibly fulfilling to me. I came back to the U.S. with new friends and experiences that I would never forget. Next, we were lucky enough to correspond with a host family in Havana, Cuba, and traveled there to stay for a week and understand Cuba and the Cuban history and culture, truly enjoying our time and memories with our family. The amazing events they had been through and still endeavored were strength to my wife and I. 6 months later, Dan and I were planning our next philanthropic trip and knew we only had about 15 to 20 days we could realistically be gone. Our ideas turned to riding back to Mexico, possibly finding an organization that we could be of some use to. As this would be a motorcycle journey, we knew that it would be a round-trip travel, so we were limited in our mileage. Until Dan brought up the, what if we only traveled one way idea. This opened up a completely new thought process, and I immediately thought of my time in Honduras and the good work that Honduras Ministries was doing, as I had firsthand seen the commitment shown not only to the people of Honduras, but the welcoming of new individuals wanting to help. I then reached out to Dr. Brinkman and to Jim to discuss a crazy idea, donating 2 motorcycles to the cause and delivering them personally. We had a grand idea of low-maintenance Hondas for the trip. The idea was sound. The brutality of the terrain, time frame, and execution of the machines provided to be a challenge. We spent the next 5 months locating the motorcycles, restoring, and working on them to make them to be as mechanically sound for the trip that we had ahead. We started off the trip by renting a van at Denver International Airport, loading our small steeds and driving straight through to Brownsville, Texas for our departure across the border. We had all of our paperwork in order and put our little bikes in our room for the first night. The next morning, we would start this journey on 90cc motorcycles, 2,500 miles through 6 countries. We crossed into Mexico with no issues. It was quite ominous as the clouds gathered and the rain and the hailstorm started the morning of our departure. We fueled up the bikes and external tanks and set off for a 250-mile day. Our estimated mileage based on our initial thoughts of how the little machines would perform at sea level versus 5,000 plus feet at home were a little overzealous. The terrain would prove to slow down the little bikes and make those large mileage days just not possible. We traveled the coast of Mexico and around the Caribbean to the Yucatan Peninsula. Our first country destination was Belize from there. Unfortunately, Dan's bike was starting to mechanically break down from the stress of riding 8 to 10 hours a day at a wide open throttle to maintain 40 miles an hour as much as possible. After being on the road for 5 days, we looked at the mileage and the time frame and decided that Belize would really not be possible and still make the original time in Honduras. At that time, Dan's bike became unreliable. We made the decision to donate the bike to a local church and purchase a new motorcycle for Dan to ride. We then headed south to Guatemala. After crossing the border, we headed inland to Coban, where my motorcycle developed a catastrophic failure. We limped it to a local dealer, same brand as Dan's bike, to make the maintenance for Honduras Ministries that much easier, and started the process to trade my bike in on a new one. After acquiring the new motorcycle for me, we were on the road to Semichampe, Guatemala. We traveled across Guatemala to the El Salvador border and then continued to ride the coast of the Pacific to the Honduras border. Our original plans had us catching a ferry to Nicaragua, but civil unrest and time restraints altered that plan, and it was decided to head directly to Choluteca from the El Salvador border. We unfortunately had more than a few border crossing issues, and these took up precious time that we were to spend in Honduras. Finally, we crossed the border into Honduras and rode the last 60 miles to Choluteca. The culmination of the event was at hand. We were fortunate enough to get in and have only one day traveling to the villages that would eventually be using the motorcycles. Dan and I feel very blessed that we were able to see how they would be used and meet one of the new riders. We felt like parents passing down an item to the next generation for use. We so very appreciated getting the opportunity to meet everybody and really learning what the depth of Honduras Ministries was doing in support of the community. They are doing good work down there. It was a bittersweet ride that last evening, knowing that our ride was over, the bikes passed on, and the long flight back to Denver was about to begin. There is so much more to this trip that Dan and I experienced. Some of the greatest days we have ever had on a motorcycle, some of the lowest times as well. This trip was such a growing and educational experience for the two of us. We are grateful to have had the opportunity. Trips such as this inspire me and empower me to do more for the world as a whole. It is a small place. People are people no matter where you go. More individuals need to travel and understand the world community to understand some of our problems are quite trivial compared to what is happening outside of the U.S. I am a very lucky man. I want to thank Jim, Francis, Manuel, Erlise, and Karen for their support and friendship. I also want to thank Right Time Watches here in Denver for their contribution of timepieces to be distributed to individuals throughout Honduras Ministries. I especially want to thank my wife, Kelly, and my mother, Louise, for the love and support that I needed to dream, envision, and complete this trip. Without their support, this would not have been possible. 20 years from now, you will be more disappointed by the things that you didn't do than by the ones that you did do. So throw off the bow lines, sail away from the safe harbors, catch the trade winds in your sails, explore, dream, discover. Mark Twain.